Hi everybody, welcome to December Storytime for 2020. Unfortunately today we've had a failure with our recording during the group reading, so I'm going to have to read the story again to you on my own. People had some really great Christmassy or Yule themed dress ups and props today, so I'm going to insert some screenshots and some pictures of the things that people did so that you get a chance to see, including some very cute kittens staying with Tegan this month. So our December topics were a load of stuff to do with spatial awareness, including losing the vital bits of something so it won't work or can't be assembled, puzzles, visual versus verbal people, Ikea problems such as getting lost, not being able to carry or fit your purchases into your car, and not being able to fit your things into your house when you get home. One of those puzzles, or a Bert and Ernie, both of these phrases coming from different members of our Storytime group, refer to the phenomenon where you need to put something somewhere, or you want to put something somewhere, but in order to do that, first you've got to move something out of the way, which then has to go where something else goes, so you have to move that, and then you have to move the thing that was in the spot that you put that into, and so on and so forth in a chain reaction in order to get things into the position you want. So that is one of those puzzles in reference to an old puzzle where you have to slide the pieces around to get them into the right position, and you only had one free square. And the Bert and Ernie refers to a book featuring Ernie and Bert that I read as a child, in which something gets broken like the cookie jar and everything has to be moved in order to find a new home for the displaced objects. We had a couple of other topics. One, of course, was Yule or Christmassy things, and the other was the concept that when something random comes up 3 times, this is a kind of omen or something to pay attention to. So we had 2 instances discussed last time where that had happened to people in the group. Beth had this happen with references to the Mappa Mundi in the Hereford Cathedral, which I'll put a link to a very interesting video about in the description or the Storytime chat. And Tegan had this happen with references to the heir to the Standard Oil fortune. So I've tried to include those things briefly in there, as well as that concept of the 3 times being significant. So first of all, I have a poem which is a Yule themed poem about the concept of the Holly King and the Oak King. If you don't know about that, it's worth looking up. It's a very nice piece of legend. As the Holly King stood in full awe and grandeur, the oaks all barren branched and hardwood cold, I was walking over crystaled lawns and crisp brown leaves, where sugared ivy wound and tendrils curled. I took up from the ground a frosted feather, and an acorn weather-worn and lacking shine, and carried home these winter-weary treasures, to bring a little wilderness inside. Upon the shelf the jars were full, the spaces taken, with shells and stones and flower petals dried. I gathered them all up into a tea tray. I shifted all the books and frames aside. And so into my home the Oak King came, to rest until the tides and treasures turned again. Today's story is called Journey to the Centre of Ikea. When Florrie had been offered the internship at the BBC, she'd sworn that despite moving so far and definitely not being able to take any of her furniture, there was absolutely no way she would be going to Ikea. Her own words returned to her now as she stood in the shiny metal lift, staring at a map that was stuck to the elevator wall. It's scientifically impossible to go into Ikea and come out with the things you went in to get, she'd told her friend Ella. As she tried to make sense of the 3 levels and warren-like walkways pictured on the wall, she knew she'd been speaking the truth. There was no way she was going to be able to find a corner-fitted bookshelf, but it was guaranteed that she would find a variety of items that she did not need instead. She should really turn back now, but already Florrie felt that she did not know how to turn back. There had been a corridor from the main road, and an entrance from the side, and then a long line of lifts, which apparently only went downwards. Florrie had got this far by following other people who looked like they knew where they were going, but now several of them were having arguments over the map, and their expertise was seeming increasingly dubious. She shouldn't have listened to that woman on the plane. After all, her name had been Pandora, and she had a ring with a skull on it and spoke in a spooky Zen voice. Florrie remembered thinking that Pandora was like an exact opposite version of herself. Perhaps that's what had made Florrie listen. When setting off on an adventure this big, no one wanted to listen to themselves. An opposite challenging opinion made more sense. And it was much more enjoyable to listen to Pan than to the Christmas carols that seemed to be playing on every broadcasting channel. When Florrie sat down on the plane, she'd been gazing at an Instagram post from her favourite houseplant enthusiast, featuring the most wonderful bookshelf, cut to fit perfectly into the corner of a room. The shelf was not only full of books, but also draped with trailing succulents. Florrie had been trying to decide if she could, with her limited spatial awareness, improvise or build something similar. Pan had immediately looked over Florrie's shoulder. "Oh, I love those. That's the second shelf like that I've seen today. Perhaps it's an omen. My grandma used to say if something came up twice, you should keep a watch for the third time, and if it occurs 3 times, it's an omen. You have to listen to omens." Florrie had been about to express skepticism when Pan had opened her copy of the in-flight magazine, and there on the front page was another image of a room with a corner bookcase. That settled it for Pan, who said, "I'll have to get one," and began hurriedly doing some research on where to buy such a bookshelf, trying her best to find out before they were told to put their phones into flight mode. "Do you get omens a lot?" Florrie asked, doing up her uncomfortable seatbelt and trying not to elbow Pan in the face as she took off her jumper. "Oh, yes. Only quite often I'm not sure what they mean. Like, last week on 2 different occasions, I heard people mention the heir to the Standard Oil fortune, but who knows what that has to do with me or if it's a real omen at all." Florrie nodded. "Oh, you mean the woman the new Taylor Swift song's about, who was so ridiculously extravagant?" Pan looked at Florrie with wide eyes. "I didn't know the Taylor Swift song was about her. This could almost be the third mention." Florrie offered the fortune-telling stranger one of her earbuds, on which the aforementioned song was playing. "I hope the plane doesn't need oil or something," she'd chuckled, thoroughly spooking her new friend. The plane, however, had taken off uneventfully, and after the first 5 hours, even Pan had to admit that it probably wasn't involved in any omens. When they landed, Florrie and Pan began the awkward dance of "I hope I didn't sleep on you," and "I think my headset has got under your knee." And it occurred to Florrie that they'd discussed many things, yet failed to tell one another their names. "Well, I guess I probably won't ever see you again," she laughed. "But I'm Florrie, if you ever want to put a name to the memory of the corner shelf-loving Taylor Swift girl." Pan did an airy little laugh as she stuffed things from the overhead locker into her backpack. "I'm Pandora, Pan for short, if you want. And looks like you can get those corner shelves at Ikea, by the way." Then Florrie couldn't work out how to fit all her things back into her own bag, and they spent an awkward post-goodbye 10 minutes with Pan giving instructions like, "Take the camera out. Now put the jumper there and wrap it around the camera bag," until Florrie's bag looked like a nicely tessellated jigsaw puzzle. Then they finally said, "Bye then," and wandered off in opposite directions, to the extent that one can do so when in a customs queue. And so here was Florrie, against her better judgment, following someone else's omen about corner bookcases to Ikea, a place that made her squirm, though evidently not enough to dissuade her when it came to bookshelves. The lift finally stopped descending, and the squabbling crowd shuffled out and obediently moved off along the arrows painted on the shiny blue lino. Florrie let them move ahead of her a bit so she could try to look across the room for some sort of landmark. She tried to glance back at the map, but the lift doors threatened to chew her up, so she hurried out, wide-eyed, a sudden blast of extra heating combining with her breath to fog up her glasses. When she was done wiping the fog off with the cuff of her bright red Christmas jumper, Florrie peered back out at the space ahead of her. It really wasn't possible to see the four walls of this level, or locate where the next set of stairs were to go down further into the maze. High partitions blocked her line of sight in a tangle of narrow pathways adorned with display storage and lighting. It was like trying to see what lay ahead on a zigzagging path through a thick forest. Florrie took a deep breath. She would just have to go slowly and methodically, and stay on the marked walkways following the arrows. How hard could it be? Florrie locked eyes with the decorative wicker duck and made her way into the display of kitchens. People were milling about in the little fake rooms as though they were at home. Florrie found herself wondering whether anyone ever tried to hide in here and camp out overnight. It would be frustrating, though, surely, that most of the appliances weren't wired up. A couple were examining a couch and coffee table combination with thick, shaggy piled carpet underneath, and had evidently been discussing their choices for some time, as their child had curled up on the comfortably carpeted flooring and appeared to be asleep. Florrie spotted a set of stainless steel measuring cups held together by a little heart-shaped ring, and decided these would be very useful for making the Yule log cake she planned to offer her fellow interns. She snagged the measuring cups from their hook on one of the false walls, and that was when she realised that all the other Ikea shoppers had big blue and yellow tarpaulin bags or trolleys with them, and she only had her two hands. Okay, let's face it, she was going to end up buying various crockery and pots and pans and blankets and lamps. At least she really was furnishing her apartment almost from scratch and had a use for all of these. There was no way she could carry everything. Plus, if by some miracle she could actually find the corner bookshelf, it would be too heavy to cart about by hand. She was going to have to double back and find where everyone else had got their trolleys from. Florrie looked up and around her for the first time in what felt like a while. The other shoppers had led her astray. There was no arrow on the floor in sight. She tried to stop looking all around her, like a cat trying to keep track of a fly. Something about this place gave her the feeling that no matter how wide she opened her eyes, she could never look at everything properly. Instead, she closed them. She'd turned right into this display room, so she should turn left out of it. She tried to recall the physical sensation of each turn, reversing the movement to tell her which way to go. Thud. Florrie opened her eyes to see a mountain of pillows blocking her path. Had these been here before? She edged into another display room, this one an office space, to get around this cave-in. The desk had a small round pot on it with a tiny rose-shaped succulent inside. Florrie instinctively trailed her fingers over the leaves, trying to remember whether there was a tissue in her coat pocket to wrap a cutting in. But her nefarious impulse was curbed quickly. The plant was fake. Gross, she muttered under her breath, as she tried to find a way back to the marked path. People around her frowned. It didn't do to go against the flow in here. After several false starts, and now carrying a box containing a three-dimensional wooden jigsaw puzzle, the set of measuring cups, a handy phone stand for when looking at recipes, and a bedside lamp, Florrie finally emerged into a more open area, and spotted a few trolleys parked by the wall. Whilst they were empty, there was no knowing whether this was actually a trolley bay or just somewhere a few people had left them. But at this point, Florrie didn't care. She grabbed one and offloaded her odd collection of items into it, then stood looking back the way she'd come, trying to get her bearings. It was left into this aisle and straight ahead for 4 display rooms, she muttered out loud under her breath. Wow, I'd never remember all those instructions, said a familiar voice at her elbow. Florrie jumped and whirled. She could have sworn no one was in this open area when she entered it. Pandora? From the plane? What on earth are you doing here? Pan shrugged in a dreamy, half-thinking about something else kind of way. Same reason as you, I guess. Came to look for that bookshelf. Florrie eyed Pan's trolley. It contained a patchwork cushion with a duck on it, a doormat covered in stars, a set of deep blue dinner plates, and a lot of jars. I know, sighed Pan. I think it's scientifically impossible to come into Ikea and actually just get what you came to buy. Florrie laughed. That's what I told my Australian friends. I said there was no way I was coming here, but you convinced me when they said they'd have the bookcase. She looked at Pan and smiled. I had no idea we were headed for the same town. Pan shrugged again. Neither did I. I came over here on a gap year from my history studies, because, there's a lot of historical sites. I was especially interested in Hereford, because their cathedral has this amazing Mappa Mundi, but she trailed off. Omens? Asked Florrie, half joking and smiling. Omens, confirmed Pan seriously. Then she seemed to focus. Anyway, bookshelf. Want to split up and see who can find it fastest? Florrie grimaced. Oh no, I'd be way behind. You'll actually never see me again this time. Pan smiled a small smile at this, somewhat mysterious. Really? You were reciting such detailed directions just now. Florrie rolled her eyes. Only because I have to. Words or physical movements I can remember. Visual stuff? No. I have aphantasia, see. Pan giggled. Oh, this place is not your friend. You do realise that you may have to assemble the bookcase, and the instructions are pictures, and sometimes they sort of miss out showing how it should look after you do the step. Yes, okay, thanks, Pandora, Florrie laughed. I'll figure it out. Someone somewhere will have done it on YouTube. But won't that be back to front? Pandora inquired. Florrie looked confused. Oh, I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get to it. We probably won't even be able to find the bookcases anyway. Pan looked suddenly distracted. Oh, look at this adorable little cat pen jar. A few moments later, and Florrie was following Pan back into the labyrinth, the cute cat pen jar now riding in the front of Pan's trolley. Just stick with me, okay? Pan was saying. I'm a very visual thinker. If anyone can conquer Ikea, it's me. There are actually loads of shortcuts you can use to avoid going all the way around. I'll see if I can remember some. Florrie felt a tug of concern. I sort of get the feeling that deviating from the set route is not tolerated. Might be on a list of rules somewhere, she replied. Nah, Pan breathed, sounding the least dreamy Florrie had heard her. Don't worry about that. Just follow me. I'm in my element. Florrie sighed. It still seemed like a bad plan, but it was between that and making her own way through on super slow mode, possibly retracing her steps multiple times before she found her way downstairs to pay. Following Florrie, it had to be. Oh my gosh, look, another cat! Pan was now looking at a sculpture positioned among the vases. Florrie looked, and then, over Pan's shoulder, she saw them. Rows and rows of houseplants. plants, she exclaimed, pointing. Pan replied, turning various sculptures over and over in her many ringed fingers, as if feeling for something in their surface. Florrie moved past her and over to the beautiful greenery. There were cacti and orchids and bulbs and succulents of all shapes and sizes. Florrie had to tell herself sternly not to break any bits off to strike. Then she saw it, a little succulent, no bigger than the palm of her hand, shaped like a heart growing out of the soil. Florrie cupped her hands around the pot as if it was a cup of tea. "Hello," she told the plant, holding it up like a child to her eye level and placing it in the front section of her trolley. "I think my new apartment has just the windowsill for you." She rearranged her trolley, shifting the set of saucepans and the cutting board forward so that the lamp could move over and make room for some potting soil in a bigger pot. This baby succulent wouldn't stay small forever. Then she looked back over to the vases and statues, grinning in delight at her find, and saw that Pandora was no longer standing there. Florrie had a moment of panic, before remembering that she'd not in fact come to Ikea with Pan, and she did not necessarily have to leave with her either. They were probably headed in completely different directions anyway. She simply needed to find the arrows and follow them downstairs. Florrie moved carefully back towards the sculptures, dodging an area filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes that made her feel momentarily as if she was being followed. To her great satisfaction, the arrows on the ground reappeared and led to an escalator ramp. Unfortunately, the escalator had a sign saying, "No trolleys." Florrie gave it an incredulous look. How were people with trolleys supposed to get down? She observed a few other people's tactics, and then, having seen no one use an alternative method, decided to go rogue and ride the escalator anyway. She got far fewer cross looks for this, she felt, than she'd had for going the wrong way on foot earlier. What strange rules and rule-breaking conventions this place had. Florrie emerged from the escalator into a huge warehouse space. She might have thought she'd accidentally reached a staff-only level of the building, this having happened to her on previous occasions, if it weren't for the fact she could see plenty of other shoppers moving up and down the aisles and retrieving large, flat-packed cardboard boxes from the shelves. This, Florrie realised, was where she was supposed to get her bookshelf. She located a computer on a stand, displaying a catalogue rather like a library. Well, located might be a strong word to use. There were catalogue stations in the middle of the wide, shiny concrete floor, pretty hard to miss. Florrie didn't remember the model of her coveted corner shelf, and the tiny pencil she'd picked up upstairs to record numbers seemed to somehow have entirely lost its lead, so she just searched for bookcase. To Florrie's great delight, a number of bookshelves appeared, with the corner shelf featured right in the centre of the screen. She tapped at the image excitedly, but then came the dreaded washed-out grey message, "Out of stock." Florrie gritted her teeth. She'd been in here all day for this. That Pandora had better not have got the last one. Well, Florrie supposed she still needed a bookshelf. Sadly, she clicked on a small standard shelf of similar height and repeated the aisle number over and over in her head until she found it. Navigating was easier down here in the open. Hauling the flat-packed box onto her trolley, she shoved her assortment of items that were not what she'd come here to buy over to the self-serve checkouts. The substitute bookcase scanned fine, and Florrie laid it flat on the scales. Next was the lamp. Florrie picked it up. It felt oddly light. She turned it over. There was no cable, globe, socket, or stand. She'd bought a lampshade. Florrie sighed and scanned her 3D puzzle and her beloved heart-shaped succulent. Then the measuring cups. She turned them over and over, looking for a barcode or tag. "Excuse me," she said eventually to the nearest member of staff. I think these are missing a barcode. The staff member examined them. Should have a tag attached, he said. Yes, Florrie replied. That's what I thought. Think you might have grabbed the display ones, the shop assistant told her. Oh, was that why they were the only set? She'd just thought they were popular. Can you get a different one? The staff member asked. Florrie thought about where the measuring cups had come from. Never mind, she told him, setting the cups aside. It was only when Florrie was through the checkout and being carried along on the tide of exiting shoppers, pushed back into the lift and spewed out into the car park, that she remembered she did not have a vehicle here, and the trolley did not belong to her. She considered delivery, discovered that a taxi was probably cheaper, and had to pay several pounds extra due to the amount of time it took her to work out how to fit everything in the boot. It was well past dinner time when Florrie knelt on her floor, looking at images that described how to assemble her shelf. These aren't instructions, she complained to her new succulent plant. These are M.C. Escher drawings. There was one type of large plastic screw-lock object that Florrie couldn't seem to find anywhere, and it looked as though these were the key bits that hold the sides of the shelf onto the top and bottom. She'd also discovered a piece missing from the 3D ornamental puzzle, and found several metal objects she did not know the purpose of. And she had a lampshade with no lamp attached on her coffee table. It was fair to say that Florrie, usually a bubbly glass half full kind of person, was feeling pretty put out. Well, the one thing she definitely couldn't go wrong doing was taking all the boxes down to the bin, she supposed. At least that would tidy the place up a bit. She grabbed her keys and gathered up all the cardboard, squeezed into the entranceway, struggled with her door, and finally shoved her way out, holding everything, almost bumping into someone coming down the hall. Florrie dropped some bits and swore. It's you, said the person she'd nearly collided with. That's 3. Sorry, what? Florrie regathered her cardboard and peered around it to see Pandora. She blinked. You're here? 3 times you, Pan exclaimed. You're your own Omen. Florrie was not sure how she was meant to respond to this. She hitched the boxes up in her arms. Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you, Pan murmured, trying to grab the bookshelf box off of Florrie and making her drop things. Florrie gave up and let things fall. Pan took the shelf box, stuck her arm down the side of it, and pulled out a little plastic bag which had been taped to the inside of the cardboard. It contained the missing plastic screw objects. Oh, Florrie smiled. Thanks. That's one thing I actually have all the bits of now. Wait a minute, Pan told her, and unlocked the door to the flat opposite. Florrie shook her head in disbelief. Pan ducked inside, then re-emerged with the missing piece of Florrie's puzzle and the base of a lamp. These were in my trolley, she explained. Florrie shook her head some more. Wait, are you missing some metal clip-type things? Pan clapped her hands in delight. Yes, they're to hold all my new storage boxes together. Florrie went and fetched them, still digesting the fact that Pan was apparently moving in across the hall. There was one thing she had to know. Did you get a corner shelf? She demanded, as she handed Pan the clips. Pandora shook her head. No, they were sold out. I got the same one as you. Then she narrowed her eyes at Florrie. Are we secretly the same person? She asked in that quiet tone that suggested she really thought it was possible. Florrie looked from her own bright yellow daisy-patterned cardigan to Pan's skull-shaped earrings and blood-red lipstick. I don't think so, she said carefully. Although it does seem a bit as though, at least on this side of the world, one of us can't exist without the other. Pan nodded somberly, and Florrie realised that grinning as she'd said this had done nothing to prevent Pan from taking it quite literally. "Do you actually need a flatmate?" asked Pan seriously. Florrie thought about trying to squish the other interns in here for Christmas, and about Pan spooking them all and trying to read their tea leaf. But then she thought about the absurdly priced rent and the back-to-front attempt at a bookshelf currently on her floor. "You know what? I think I actually do," she said. "Okay," Pan replied simply, in that weird Zen way that she had. She turned and opened her own door again, and Florrie saw past her to where a series of neatly assembled pieces of Ikea furniture were already vying for position. Florrie murmured. "I didn't think about all the stuff." Pan looked from her own furniture to Florrie's attempted furniture and back again a few times. Then she resolutely took hold of her bookshelf. "Right, first, help me move this out into the hallway. Then we have to put all your stuff in the bathroom, except your bookshelf, so we can get these into the corner." Florrie blinked, already losing the thread, and just followed Pan's lead. As they passed the kitchen, Florrie groaned. "Hey, Pan, I think I found the standard oil air omen." Pan wiggled the bookcase up against the wall and moved Florrie's large potted cactus into the corner next to it. "Oh, what is it?" "Neither of us have got any cooking oil." Pan groaned and shoved Florrie's bookcase up against the wall on the other side of the cactus. "Oh, shit," Florrie giggled. Something about Pan swearing was very weird. But then Pan spread her hands and stepped back. "There you go, Florrie. Corner bookcase." And Florrie beamed, even as she moved between Pan and the window to stop Pan from seeing her third cat for the day. Because if there was anyone who could make 2 flats worth of Ikea stuff fit into one, and comprehend the pictures while Florrie did the words, it was this funny fortune teller from the aeroplane, who she'd known exactly 5 days, and that was rather brilliant. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this story. And if you're very clever and you know about the Oak King and the Holly King, you might have worked out that I was doing a bit of a metaphor there with the characters. We had some requests during our session with everybody. First of all was surprise animals, owing to the kittens that were featured in our session. And then somebody said nasturtiums, which led to, in general, invasive plants that are very fast spreading and take over your whole garden. Secret passageways and spaces in gardens, and adults getting into kids' games. Journeys within 4 walls, so adventures and significant things that can happen without leaving home. Unlikely people swearing or using language that doesn't seem to go with them, like Pan did. Sunday activities, such as a Sunday drive or a hot Sunday afternoon indoors. And common phrases or idioms. Related to that is when you have your own personal term for something, but other people do get it. So in contrast to previously when we had kind of in-group language that you only understand if you are familiar with the people and the context. This time talking about when you use a term for something but people get it. For example, my mum has a tree on her wall she refers to as the elbow tree, and her friend referred to that same thing as the tree with outstretched arms. But they both knew exactly which tree one another meant. So some things like that in our next one. So it's sounding like being a lovely sort of garden and home adventure, perhaps going down into the small world that is inside all of our living spaces, which I think we're all pretty familiar with at the moment. So thanks for coming along to this story. Next time, we're going to be having the story on the Sunday, the 10th of January, rather than Saturday the 9th, owing to the fact that lots of members of the Storytime group are attending a different event on the Saturday night, making some music in the garden, which kind of goes really nicely with our garden-themed story we're going to have on the Sunday. And I'll also be doing some teaching of my creative writing group on that Saturday. So we're going to do it on the Sunday at the same time. So we'll hopefully see you all again on Sunday the 10th. And between now and then, of course, it's Christmas. So wishing everyone a lovely Christmas. Hopefully catch up with some of you for it. And on the 27th of December, the art exhibition that I've been working on with Margaret from Storytime and Emily from Storytime, along with a series of other artists from both the UK and Australia, is going to be premiering on YouTube. That's happening at 10 a.m. Southampton time and 8:30 at night in Adelaide. If you're in another time zone, you can work it out on the time zone converter when that is for you. I hope you'll come and watch, and we'll hope to talk to you then about what you think of our dreamlands. So see you again soon. Thanks for coming.